good question, which leads to a lot of good answers, which also leads to more questions. We have a better way to get the answers you're searching for. We'll ask you a question. What are your goals? Then we base our answers on two things: your goals and our expertise to get you there. Personalized guides will break it down for you in one place, the very place you usually go for answers, online. Let's get started. The earlier you do, the more your money could do for you, your family, and the world. So what was your question? You don't have to search for the answer. You know right where to find it.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today at Room for Optimism, a very interesting, I hope, panel all about buying real estate for the first time in what can sometimes be a really tough market. And I am joined by some amazing expert panelists. And to kick us off, I would first like to just turn the floor over to Giselle Rivera from UBS, who's going to do some introductions, and then I'm going to introduce us to our amazing panelists who will hopefully share some real estate secrets with us. But welcome, Giselle.
Thank you so much, Kara, and hello, everyone. On behalf of UBS Global Wealth Management, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us for this conversation. My name is Giselle Rivera, and I'm the head of UBS's Rising Generation Client segment, where I work with our UBS financial advisors to serve clients who are earlier in their journeys of establishing and navigating their careers, financial goals, and even the place where they want to live. I'm a millennial myself, and I know the power of young people in action is impossible to ignore. We've marched and spoken out and affected change, and as we grow our collective wealth, it will add another layer of influence to whatever we want to achieve for ourselves, but also for our families, communities, and the world around us. Our purpose statement at UBS is reimagining the power of investing and connecting people for a better world. We believe this rising generation will lead us there, and that's why UBS has made a commitment to understanding and addressing our needs. And our UBS advisors are the experts who help clients put themselves in the best position to achieve those lofty goals that they have for themselves. And it's never too early to start thinking about your financial picture. In fact, it can be very powerful to start early. And personally, as a millennial myself, living in downtown New York City, renting in downtown New York City, I should say, I am definitely in the right place today. And I'm actually exploring homeownership myself, so I'm personally excited to hear from our panel of experts. So Kara, I'll turn it back over to you to kick us off.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I have three superstar panelists joining me who can hopefully give us some tips, tricks, insights, and maybe even reassurance. We'll see how it goes. My first guest is Linda Champion. She has a very impressive resume. I'm going to try to synthesize it quickly here. Linda brings over 20 years of experience in community service, real estate, zoning, administrative, legal, and government relations to the table. She's a former Suffolk County prosecutor, is an advisor to the president of Whittier Street Health Center, board member of the Urban League of Eastern Massachusetts, and co-founder of the first nonprofit real estate brokerage service wholly owned by Urban Edge. So that's just a small glimpse of what Linda does, but thank you so much, Linda, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited for today.
I did, and a double ram, Suffolk University and Suffolk Law. Gotta say that. Melanie Swayze, who's the principal and team founder and realtor affiliated with Unlimited Sotheby's International Realty. She founded the Good Boston Living Team, which is well regarded for providing intimate, insightful advising to discerning clients buying and selling homes in and around Boston. Welcome, Melanie.
Good to be here.
Thank you. And Eileen Woods, the real estate guru of the Boston Globe. She's the real estate editor, and she handles web production for Address, the national award-winning weekly print section on buying and selling real estate, home design, DIY, and gardening, and realestate.boston.com, which is the online version of all the above. Hello.
Hi, Kara.
Hi.
And don't forget, Kara, that you have a story due to me today.
Excuse me, I'm also going to apologize that I'm getting over a cold, so if I sneeze mid-panel, it's live panel. Don't take it personally. What did you say, Eileen?
I said, don't forget you have a story due to me today.
Yes, right. 2:30. I'll get right on that. Thank you all for being here. There's a lot to talk about in not a lot of time. And so just want to start, first of all, by I'm going to sneeze again. Oh, sorry. All right. One thing that I'd like to start with, and I promise I won't sneeze again until somebody else starts talking. This is really important. The overall market right now, I think, is perhaps intimidating to even first-time buyers who might be well positioned. And I'd love to, Linda or Melanie, maybe one of you can kick us off. What is sort of the market snapshot right now nationally? Obviously, regionally, it differs a bit, but what is sort of the national picture right now? Are things very competitive? Have things eased up a bit due to COVID? What is your take? Either one of you.
So my take is that the market continues to be extremely competitive, especially in those areas that are like most desirable. So a Boston, New York, certain parts of New York City, San Francisco, even locations like Houston, Texas, and Dallas, Texas, or before the most recent hurricane hit, even areas right outside of New Orleans were pretty aggressive. Anything that's coastal due to COVID, anything that is considered a destination spot remains competitive because people are working from home and, choosing to be in areas that offer some more outdoor space.
Melanie, what do you think?
I think that's true. And then when you zoom in on some of these metropolitan areas, like Linda mentioned, so Boston, which is unique in that it's actually a small and dense metropolitan area compared to a New York City or San Francisco. There are dynamics at play that have been in place since 2012, really, since coming out of the mortgage crisis of the last serious recession. So what we're experiencing right now, post-pandemic or during the pandemic, is layered on top of that. So I tend to think about it in a more pulled back scale about why is inventory tight? Why are people running to buy? And a big part of that has to do with rent prices being high. And also that for a lot of people's lives, with the exception of working from home given the pandemic, a lot of people's lives really orient around transit, really orient around communities where there are a lot of amenities, and you're going to pay for that. So what I could speak most directly to is what's happening in a metropolitan area like Boston. I'm happy to dive into that.
I think that would be great. We can definitely talk about Boston specifically a little bit because I think it is sort of a microcosm of how competitive and how emotionally charged the real estate market is. And that leads me into sort of an important question just in terms of, so what I do quite a bit for the Globe is parenting writing. And I write a lot about first-time parents, first-time home buyers, people who really feel like, okay, I have a family and the next logical step is to buy a home. And you don't feel like you've made it maybe as an adult until you own a home. But this isn't our parents' housing market. Like I think to my parents who bought a house in Acton, Boston suburb, great schools for like $75,000 in 1979. And when I was looking in around Boston in 2010, my parents were like, these prices are crazy. You're nuts for putting in offers on these houses that are, smaller than ours with smaller lots. And I'm like, no, this is a deal, really. But it was a different world. So could you speak a little bit to sort of that psychology for people? What makes that first-time home buying experience so emotionally charged? And what do you think home ownership represents for people? And either Linda or Melanie, you can talk about that a little bit.
Linda, you
So
want to
for
dive
me,
in?
sorry, Melanie, go ahead, Melanie.
Go for it. Go for it.
Well, I was just going to say that I think we should all just acknowledge the fact that, housing is a fundamental human right. And I think once we start there, then we can start thinking about like, why is there a shortage of quality, affordable housing? And affordability is on a large scale, right? It's a huge spectrum. What someone can afford making $50,000 a year is very different than what someone can afford making $150,000 a year. So what makes it competitive, I think, is the portrayal of the market in the media. It is not as difficult as people think. There's no real secret sauce or formula to doing it, but I would say that there are obstacles to buying. And if people make sure that they address those obstacles before they hit the market, they're going to find great success. And for right now in the market that we're in, the obstacles are those buyers seeking to buy who've experienced a COVID layoff or a furlough. It's going to be recent graduates and the length and longevity of their employment in the marketplace. And it's going to be those recent graduates or young families who are still battling and tackling student loan debt.
Melanie, what do you think?
It's interesting. I tend to think about real estate in a very strategic way. So I don't actually quite come at it in that rite of passage emotional way, even though we get people to realize that kind of dream, but it's really thinking about the mechanics and the why. And what I generally tell folks is that in a market like Boston's, and this is true again in your San Francisco's, your Seattle's, your Portland, Oregon, that people are having to make decisions based on needs. It's very supply and demand, very much I need. So for example, Kara, when you were buying, it might have been because you had a young one on the way and or were planning to. So there are actual real structural needs that need to be satisfied. And so people are going at it with that. It's like, I'm going to have this home. How am I going to factor in childcare? Can my retired parent come live with us? What can we afford to buy that can accommodate that? So we end up satisfying those like yearning kind of desires, but from a place of need, really. And it can actually end up being fun. You can satisfy those needs, but it's less about, oh, I just want to buy a house. The options
Right.
are so
Oh, yeah.
limited. It's not the thing of what your parents did. And also when your parents bought, interest rates were probably 18%, right?
Yeah.
So it's just a different planet, and people have to come at it with a different mindset. It's about avoiding high rents. What can I own that's going to satisfy my needs where I have control and stability?
Right. And well, to that point then, and Eileen, I think that maybe, I'm not sure if we've covered this in the real estate section, maybe so, you can maybe speak to that, but what happens if you bid? What is the anatomy of a good bid? Because you talk about being strategic, right? It's not about emotion, it's about strategy. What actually goes into making a winning bid? And I know this just personally, anecdotally, from friends who are offering so much over asking for places these days. Just a house down the street from me, I live in Arlington, Mass, went about, I don't know, $250,000 over asking. Is there ever a threshold where it can go too high? So maybe those are two questions rolled into one, but the anatomy of a good bid, and does it always have to go over to make it attractive? And what happens if it goes too far over? Did you ever write about that, Eileen?
Yes, we did. I think the anatomy of a good bid means that you have a good buyer's agent on your side who can do a good comparative market analysis. And so you do your research. For example, if you want to buy in Somerville, our real estate website on boston.com, you can look at sales in Somerville and look at the number of bedrooms and the square footage and all that and see what properties are going for. So there's a lot of research that goes into a good bid. Some people will try to write letters to the homeowner, but then you get into fair housing issues and things like that. It's just a whole lot of research that goes into a good bid. And as far as going over the asking price, I think that you should do that with a note of caution that when you overbid and you get the winning bid, when the house is appraised, that doesn't mean that your mortgage company is going to cover more than what the house is worth.
Right.
So you have to be very, very
I'd
careful.
love to speak to that. If you
Go ahead, Melanie.
Please,
yeah. I mean, this is the stuff that's fun for me. I enjoy the strategy, and I actually really enjoy the dynamism in our markets. It's not enigmatic to me. It all actually is pretty sane. It might feel out of control, but once clients understand the backdrop that they're working in, what are the market forces, they can be really informed and step forward with a strategy well before they even look at property. They understand what kinds of things to look at, where they can afford to take certain risks. So it's really thinking about what are your resources, what are your needs, and mapping that onto the market. So if you're talking about, for example, what's a place worth right now, because there's so little inventory, there's so few houses to look at and compare, to do a comparative market analysis, and that's been true for a decade, it actually is inaccurate to do price per square foot, or to do what sold in the last 3 months, or to do this is what Zillow or Redfin says, because the market is actually moving faster than that. So when you look at sales from 2 months ago, that actually might be outdated based on what the market need is right now. And that's very much seasonal. It's very much about what are other buyers thinking about and what are the risks and trade-offs they're making right now because their lease is about to end, or because folks who didn't jump quickly enough in January or February are now in the heat of the season in April. So you can almost, in a kind of very real-time way on the ground, sense what people's level of urgency and frankly desperation is. So understanding who your competitors are and what they're thinking about, and who your sellers are and why they're selling, and what their constraints are and what they need in order to sell and close on time. That's what factors in for structuring an offer as far as I'm concerned. So generally with my clients, we're talking about how much money you have to begin with. And can you supplement those funds from family? Can you supplement those funds from retirement? And we take that cash and we say, okay, how much would you use toward a down payment? How much would you use toward closing costs, which we estimate to be about 1.5% of the purchase price? How much would you have on hand for repair reserves? Because you're going to assume that in this market, there's so many buyers needing a thing and so few properties to compete for, that you're probably not going to be negotiating with the seller about repair items, because the seller is going to get lots of offers that they have to make. They have to choose one, right? So you want to take certain questions off the table for the seller. What's a property or situation where I can afford to replace that roof, for example? So we're backing that out of your budget. We're also backing out an appraisal shortage. In a lot of these markets where these sale values are increasing very steadily, you're rarely going to run into a short appraisal, but you need to factor that in. You also want to think about, okay, if I'm competing in this neighborhood versus that, at this time in the season, things like this are selling for 10% above asking price in this area, but 3 streets over, they're selling for 20% or 25% above. So you're understanding what people are thinking and why. And then you put that into your numbers. Okay, and for this kind of property, I can afford to take this risk around appraisal. If the value comes in short, we already planned on that. We and our lender have a plan of how we're going to absorb that difference. And that might not even mean you put down a higher down payment. It might mean just restructuring your loan. So that's the stuff, the fun of it, which is actually gaming out a plan before you even look at property. You're figuring out what should you look at, and you have an offer strategy in mind as you tour properties. That's how my clients and I work together.
So the anatomy of a good offer to me is what Eileen said. It starts with having the right team around you. And the team doesn't only include a buyer's agent. It also includes who your insurance agent's going to be, who your lender is going to be. Every bank within the community that you're in has a reputation. Some banks have a reputation of being able to close with seamless, transitions. Some banks have, it's like a train wreck, like you start and it's just everybody's stressed out. So the strength of your loan officer, my advice to buyers is to strengthen your offer. Make sure you have at least 2 to 3 approval letters. Make sure that you understand the type of product that the lender is giving you. So for example, what strengthens your offer is if the seller's agent is telling their client, hey, listen, this house has conditions that exist. For example, a fuse box or chipped or peeling paint. This will not qualify for financing under a federal program. And you then only are walking around with an FHA approval letter, we're going to have a problem. So any offer that you submit where the seller's agent thinks that the product itself is going to run into a problem, it's highly likely that you won't be selected. So please make sure that you have multiple types of approval letters that you're shopping with. Cash versus financing, really, at the end of the day, for me, if I was on the seller's agent side, doesn't matter. What matters is the terms that you're presenting. So for example, if you have a senior citizen who is downsizing, and you know that that senior, in order to sell, has to find assisted living, then make your terms flexible. Say, if it's subject to seller finding suitable housing, say to the seller, I will give you as much time as possible. Stay away from super soppy, oh dear Abby letters, right? And the reason you do that is because they violate fair housing laws. The reason they violate fair housing laws is because you don't know what bias and prejudice or implicit bias people bring to the table or how they read into things. You might think it's great that it's right next to your parish and you want to, continue your children's education in a Catholic school, but you may be writing a letter to someone who's an atheist and they may have a different take on that letter. So it's really important, just keep it, the numbers don't lie, stick to the numbers. The other thing that's going to make you super competitive when you look at putting that offer together is the strength of your buyer's agent and their reputation in the marketplace. There are some buyer's agents, when we see them coming, we know we don't want to do business with them because of the history that they've had with an agency or in the marketplace. So make sure that your agent that you've selected has a reputation of getting it done, being transparent in all deals, and being able to help you work through problems as they arise.
Linda, how do you find that out? Is there like an Angie's List for realtors?
Oh, you find that out just by if you attend an open house or if you attend an open house and you're the buyer and they say, hi, are you represented by an agent? And you say yes, and you write that agent's name down. That interaction between that other agent and you will tell you a lot. They'll either say, oh, I know your agent, or, oh, yeah, I've worked with that person before, and they'll be more engaged with you. Sometimes if it's somebody that they know has a really bad reputation in the industry, they just kind of will stay silent. They won't say anything. There'll be no follow-up or follow-through based on your visit to the location. So everybody, carry some sort of, baggage with them to each and everything. And every transaction doesn't always go smoothly. The question is whether or not the marketplace trusts your bank, whether or not the marketplace trusts your agent. And oftentimes that is the deal. That's the deal breaker.
Let's talk about first-time buyers. Oh, Eileen, go ahead. And then I want to talk about first-time buying programs.
I just wanted to say something that's probably going to go over like a lead balloon, but just because you are approved for a mortgage of $800,000 or something like that doesn't mean you should buy a house for $800,000. When you buy a home, there are things that happen that even if you have a stellar home inspection, something could happen. Your hot water heater could go or something like that. You need to have money on hand to be able to make those repairs. So just because you look at that number and you think, oh, I have a lot of room. Just think about your needs and your family's needs and things like that.
Well, let's actually, okay, then we're going to skip ahead because that was going to be my next question. Actually, there used to be sort of a rule, like don't spend more than, I think it was 3 times your salary, I forget. But so is there still that general rule of how much should you spend? Or is that all gone out the window now?
There are rules. So remember, depending upon what lender you're working with, we classify loans in 4 categories. We look at them as conventional, first-time homebuyer products, government products, and or portfolio products. If you are looking for a first-time homebuyer loan product, then what they're going to do is keep the debt-to-income ratios super low. Traditionally, the debt-to-income ratios for a first-time homebuyer, you want them to be no more than 36%. But if you want to be more aggressive, you can go with a government loan, which will allow your debt-to-income ratios to go up as high as 51%. However, when you start to get into products like you're saying, oh, I want passive income, so I want a multifamily property, then those reserves that Eileen's talking about are going to be mandatory and built into the loan, based on the lender and the lender's temperament for risk. Some lenders are going to require that you have 12 months of the monthly payment in reserve. Other lenders will make it as low as 2 months in reserve. So when you guys are out there and you're trying to be competitive, it doesn't help you if you get the offer accepted only only to find out that you're denied at the back end because you didn't have adequate reserve in place. And that could also be the same for condo associations, particularly those associations that are smaller, that don't show adequate or sufficient reserve, and you're not anticipating putting on a new roof or building new porches. So you want to always keep in mind, you gotta have some money saved on the side above and beyond the down payment.
And I would say, aside from thinking about the constraints of loan programs, if a buyer isn't constrained and they can get any loan they want, they're trying to think about how to shop their money, what market makes sense to invest in, to own in. And they might say, well, I might need to make certain trade-offs to be close into the train, for example, but I can afford more house for less money a little bit farther out. What makes more sense to do? Where to put my money? I generally would say, first, we want to figure out what your priorities are. Why are you buying? What's happening in year 2 for you? What's happening in year 5? What's happening in year 10? If things evolve in your household situation and you need to sell, how easy will it be to sell this thing, even if the market levels out and the values drop or settle, right? So we're thinking about where best to shop your money. And part of that actually is informed by what can you afford per month, right? So people might say, well, this is what I'm paying for rent. And I might say, well, generally speaking, this is who your competitors are right now in the market for what you're thinking about buying, and they're paying this for rent. And so basically, if you can buy something and pay about what you're paying for rent or somewhat more, that's kind of in range, because I want to have people think about what's your alternative if you didn't buy, if you didn't win, if you didn't get this thing, what are you doing? You're paying this amount of rent and not getting to write off mortgage interest and other things. So I think that where you might say the tolerance from a lender standpoint or a financial advisor standpoint would be, don't pay more than 35% or whatever for housing. That's important. But then also, what would you be paying if you were renting? So it's one of the factors we think about.
That makes me ask, actually, is it always a good idea to buy? Is it ever a better idea just to rent?
I think sometimes it is. I mean, I've actually advised a couple of clients in the last few months to continue renting. It depends on everyone's financial situation, what
Right.
kind of risk they take on, and how long they're going to own the thing they have. If they're paying really high for it and would need to potentially sell in 2 years and couldn't easily rent it out as a backup plan, they probably shouldn't be buying the property. So it's generally speaking, the people you're going to compete with in these markets actually have a lot of options. They can sell, they can rent it out. And so you want to float to where you can comfortably afford that risk. And that a lot of that is driven by location, and second to that, amenities, and perhaps third to that, condition.
Right.
So renting versus buying, really, it's an individual approach to me. You have to sit down with your financial planner. The purpose, remember, of having this home is that you get a sizable deduction, a tax deduction. Some people need that sizable tax deduction to offset the income tax that they're paying. Some people don't. So I think that the biggest the first thing you do is sit down with your financial planner, your tax advisor, and you say, look, is it better for me to rent or buy? As you know, we sit in Massachusetts. It's not a good idea for us to rent only because we only get a $3,000 deduction, and we only get it on the state side, not the federal side. So it has no impact on us. For a high income earner earning over $100,000 a year, I can't think of a situation unless they have a business on the side where they are offsetting the income, that it would only be good to rent versus buy. So as your income starts to go up, as you start to look at the fact that maybe you're single, you don't have deductions with respect to children or other credits you can apply, then you might want to start thinking about renting. But the best approach is sit down with a financial advisor, sit down with your accountant, and weigh it out. How much will I be paying in taxes? How much will I pay in a mortgage? What's the better option for me?
Before we go on, I just want to see if you, all three of you, and maybe Linda and Melanie in particular, are there any first-time home buyer programs that you love that you would recommend to people in terms of, mortgages and so forth?
The best place to look is a group called Neighbor Works. of America has a nationwide list of resources. You know, if you're in the New Jersey market, for example, the New Jersey government has done a great job of putting all their resources on their state website. You can just go onto their website, look at, they actually even have a brochure you can download. The same with Massachusetts. In Massachusetts, there's tremendous opportunities and resources. In Massachusetts, we also have the Federal Home Loan Bank, which offer equity builder money. You can get equity builder money if you're in a particular income bracket. The equity builder money becomes a gift to you. It does not have to be repaid. If you are living in Boston and you want to continue to live in Boston, there are other state-based programs that are phenomenal. The One Plus program is currently available, which will give buyers, first-time home buyers, up to $50,000 as a subsidy to offset their interest rates and also cover all of their closing costs. And you can make up to 125% of the average median income to still qualify, which means you can be a single person making about $96,000 a year and still qualify for programming in Boston. Everything is community specific. So always check with your local towns to see what programs they offer. The town of Easton, Massachusetts, for example, offers first-time homebuyers $90,000 to come and buy in their community because they want to encourage home ownership and they want to encourage young families to come in. So for those buyers who are out there, first stop, always check with your local government. Then check with your lender, ask the lender if they have special programs or interest rates for first-time home buyers. If you're part of a labor union, also check with your labor union because there are labor unions like the hotel workers who give $25,000 towards the purchase of a house for their members.
That is super helpful. And as I listen to you talk, I'm thinking about people who, maybe find that a condo is more affordable because it's a little bit, it's not maybe quite as expensive. It's a good first step before you own a single family home. But actually, as I'm writing for Eileen right now, you might have interesting etiquette issues when it comes down to neighbors who might be loud, the diplomacy involved in sharing a space with somebody. And then I've just heard this, and I don't know if it's true or not, condos might not appreciate as rapidly as a single family home. Do either of you or Eileen weigh in too, have a stance on whether it's better to invest like in Easton, right? A single family home, or, get that condo in Somerville or, Maplewood, New Jersey, or Hoboken or whatever. What do you think is the better way to get into the market?
I'd love to. What do you think, Eileen?
No, go ahead, Melanie. Oh,
Either or. Eileen, you're next.
after.
All right.
Okay.
So I'll say to the question about, I'll bridge these two things. The last question about first-time home buyer programs, I think those are really critical to know about and for buyers to be able to explore. And then I generally, again, think big picture about the market and what it's like to use a program or even think about a condo versus single family in the reality of the location that you're considering. Because the real estate sales, the dynamism, the competition is all very location specific, neighborhood specific, sometimes street specific. So someone might say, well, look, I can get this down payment assistance. And I might say, okay, well, do we know how long it might take the city to underwrite that program? Or are there any constraints? For example, if you take advantage of this program, it means that you need to continue owner occupying this place, that you might not be able to just move out and rent it out in 2 years. So I want people to think about if they're comfortable with those constraints and or they need more flexibility. Because interest rates are so low for conventional loans, often people opt to go the conventional route, even if it means they're not getting these special assistance programs, because it gives them more play to shop around in various locations in the market. I would and to do that with some level of control. I would also say that then if they're thinking about single family versus condo, it depends. And it generally looks like someone can afford a higher purchase price for a single family than they can for a condo, because their lender and for their own budget is going to look at the condo fee, typically there is a condo fee, as part of their monthly payment liability. So if they really could afford a higher price point and get a single family and accomplish that, and maybe trade off being closer in, it might be worth going the single family route. So I often actually check people's assumptions if they come to me and think, well, I can only buy a condo and it can be a 2-bedroom. And I might say, actually, in these communities just outside of the subway, you can afford a single family. So it very much depends. And I would say the same thing about condo values. It would never cross my mind to say that condo values appreciate less quickly than single families, not by any means. It really very much depends on the markets. If you're in what I call a condo location, a condo centric market, those sales are really solid, partly because often people are selling their condos after 5 to 7 years of owning. And so often when they're taking care of their condo and the association is taking care of their building, they're doing so with an eye to resale. So generally those markets are actually really, really vibrant because they're markets that turn. It's an entry point and then people spin out of them. Single family is going to be a little bit different. But even in central areas close to the city, people are not necessarily staying in their single families for 30 years like they used to. And they're so few and far between to get those opportunities that the resale on those is really solid. So I'm generally trying to help people think about what's the money you have, what are the needs you have right now and in the next few years, and what's the best possible location and condition that we can buy with your money. Because I would also say I'd rather you buy a single family that might need a little TLC than, for example, to buy into a condo association where they don't have solid reserves and they're not actually taking care of their property. So it very much depends what kind of risks you can take on and what's going to happen for you over time based on how much cash you have in reserves. We're thinking about it from that perspective.
What were you going to say, Eileen?
I was going to say, with condo home ownership versus single family, you also have to think about your lifestyle too. With a single family home, do you want to take care of a yard, or do you love gardening? Or with a condo association, would you rather have somebody else do it for you? But with condo associations, you also have to look at their financials, and you also have to look at maybe assessments that are coming down the line. Are they looking to replace the roof? Are they looking to redo the driveway? Or the walkways or something like that, because when those projects hit, everyone is going to be assessed a percentage of that. So you need to look at how your condo association boards are run, what kind of codes, covenants, and restrictions they have, and things like that. So it's great to think of resale and things like that. That's very, very important. But you also have to think about your lifestyle and the financial stability of that condo association.
On that note, actually, and this is something that I hear from a lot of families, like they might live, let's just use Boston as an example because we're here. They live in Somerville and they don't want to move out to, I don't know,
Acton?
No, Acton. I grew up in Acton. Great high schools, right? But it's like, it'll be a difference in lifestyle. At what point, or how do you know if a town is going to be really up and coming, 2, 3, 5 years prior? Like, oh, I'm so glad. I'll use Arlington. Oh, we bought in Arlington. And then a few years later, everyone wanted to move to Arlington. Maybe that'll be Acton in 5 years. Is there any way to predict the future?
I mean, I think that you can look at certain trends and certainly things that have to do with infrastructure and following where that infrastructure is going to be. So for example, one of the things that happened in, for example, the city of Brockton, Massachusetts, city of champions for those outside of Massachusetts, a new mayor gets installed. A new mayor has a more aggressive plan for the city. One of the things that they do is they bring in the rail line, and then all of a sudden you start to see the revitalization of a main street. And so those are the signs that tell you, okay, things are about to change here. You have a commuter rail. Commuter rail gives you direct access to Boston South Station. Speaking to the residents who are now taking it, they're telling me that they can get into Boston within 30 minutes. I mean, that's faster than if you hopped in your car and tried to travel into the city. So now you have competent, quality, reliable transportation. Then you have an aggressive revitalization plan coming from City Hall. Everything starts from the top down. One of the things I wanted to say that people have to think about in considering is your plan. And Melanie talked about this early on. What is the plan? What is the 3-year, 4-year, 5-year plan, 10-year plan? Remember that the purpose of real estate for many people is for investment purposes. Real estate is a solid, stable, conservative investment. Also remember that an individual could have up to 4 residential mortgages in their name without necessarily being considered a investor, right? So when people are thinking, and as buyers are out there and they're like, do I do the single? Do I do the 2-family? Do I do the condo? Do I do the co-op first? What do I do? Think of it this way. It all comes down to finances and numbers. If you own the single family first and you decide, today I think I want to go get passive income because I'm starting to age and I want to figure out my future and I want to be able to write more and have an income that's steady. So I'm going to go buy a 2-family house. Well, the financial picture for you changes because to buy that 2-family, you now have to put down 25%. But if you owned the 2-family first, you only have to put down 1.5% to 5% of the purchase price. And now when you go to buy the single, it's considered a trade up and you still get the benefits of that first time home buyer low down payment. So you can continue to own your 2-family and go into your single. The same with the condo. You could continue to own your condo and still purchase a single family house without having that big bullet of a down payment. So people just need to think about what their short and long-term goals are. And if they think in their future they want some passive income, then maybe their first stop really should be a condo or a multifamily property.
That actually brings up a good question in terms of what people need to put down as first-time home buyers. You always hear the rule of thumb is 20%. Sounds like that maybe isn't necessarily so. Could
No.
Melanie or Linda, what is the
So
protocol?
if you're doing a first-time homebuyer program that's backed by a subsidy, in Massachusetts, for example, we have a program called One Mortgage. You'd only put down 1.5% of the purchase price. That is customary across the board. And the town you're living in, if they participate in the program, will match the other 1.5%. If you're in a community that does not offer the match, then your maximum that you're required to put down is 3%. If you go into a federal program, if you're dealing with a veteran, veterans aren't required to put down any money. They can get 100% financing, but also doctors can get 100% financing. So if you happen to be, married to a doctor, then make them take out the loan because they don't have to put down any money and they get all of their closing costs covered as well through that product.
Another reason to marry a doctor. There you go.
So there's different, but the average is going to be 1.5% to 5%. It's going to depend upon the product. And then remember, when you get into portfolio lending, and portfolio lending is a little different because it's not traded on the secondary market. Portfolio lending stays with the actual lender, so you know who's servicing you, you know who to talk to. They can make the terms as flexible as they want for you.
What are some things then that people can do in order to make themselves competitive besides, we know that maybe you don't need 20% for a down payment. What are some other steps though that people watching right now can get lined up so when the right house comes along, once they find the right agent, they are ready to pounce? I mean, whether that is checking into credit scores or you name it. What are some things on the checklist that people should do?
Well, millennials need to go get a checkbook.
Sorry.
That's funny.
What's that?
That's funny. And yeah, millennials are having to wire their deposits because of not carrying
That's
checkbooks.
such a good point.
Yeah.
You can't Venmo?
Well, there are workarounds that some brokerages are doing. I would say you definitely want to start, as Linda mentioned earlier, with a solid team. So you're leaning on the advising, preferably of a financial advisor or tax professional, but then your real estate agent and your loan officer to really figure out what your numbers are. I also wanted to speak to the last question about how do you know what's changing in a market and what's the place to put that money. Linda gave a top-down answer, and I'm giving a bottom-up answer. I think a lot of people are walking neighborhoods and trying to figure out what's changing, what's about to turn.
Right.
And
Like
often
what will be hot next? Yeah.
it's the thing that makes you want to go hang out in that place. It's the
Yeah.
restaurants, it's the bike shops, it's a certain cafes, it's a park that just got built or rebuilt. and it's where people are converging in public spaces. That's often a place where you're going to see more restaurants coming. Those features feed on each other. So you can guess that even if the market prices adjust down, this is still going to be a place where people want to rent. And if it's a place people want to rent, it may also be a place people are going to want to buy ultimately. So all of those things feed each other in a kind of very subjective way that you're reading yourself. You are part of the market. So
Yep.
pay attention to what you're thinking about. And then, so I would say in terms of down payment, all of those things are true, that you don't need this and you don't need that. And then there's the market reality of where you're looking to compete. Because again, if a seller has 8, 15 offers to consider, they have a hard decision to make. And so they're generally going to make a decision not necessarily by who has the highest number, because they're going to get attractive numbers, period. It's going to be one who makes them feel confident, like, I like this agent, I trust this setup, I like how they've approached us, I like their thoughtfulness in their offer and their terms. But it's also who represents the least risk. And that has to do with timing, how quickly a transaction, if the buyer has a financing contingency as part of their purchase, how quickly can they get their loan commitment, how likely are they based on who their lender is, and are there any risks? Are there any questions as it relates, for example, to appraised value? If you're in a situation, if sellers in a situation where they have offers that are 20% above their asking price, they want to choose an offer where it may not be the highest number, but where they feel very confident that it will close at or close to that number. So that's where down payment actually does matter, right? You can make your contingency for your purchase, say, I'm going to buy this house, but only if I can get a mortgage of 95%. You can do that. But if you're competing against other offers that say, I only need a loan of 80% or 50%, you're going to look riskier, in theory, to the seller than a buyer who doesn't have as much that they need to borrow. And so that's just a matter of fact. It doesn't mean that you're less likely to get a loan, but it does mean that if there's an appraisal issue, you might not have as much cash to absorb that. You might
Yeah.
then need to negotiate, and sellers have to think about that. So it's really, how do you position yourself? How do you explain the risk that you are, and how you explain, here's what would happen if there's an appraisal shortage. We've got you covered, right? So you're trying to up front project for the seller, here are the risks you might be thinking about, but we've already addressed them. And so I have my clients think about what markets, what locations, what property types, what streets they can compete on based on their ability to absorb those kinds of risks. Because the down payment does actually matter. It's a signal to the seller about how much you can actually absorb, honestly.
Yeah. Well, so that raises the question then, why bother if there are people, and in the Boston market there are, and I think in many major markets there are, they just offer all cash. Like, can you buy a house if you need a mortgage?
Yes. So a couple
Okay.
things. Let's think about why cash matters. Cash matters for two key reasons. One, with a cash purchase, you don't need to take the time it would take to underwrite a loan.
Right.
And two, with cash, usually a cash buyer is not getting an appraisal. They're not getting a third party opinion of the value of that property. They're going to buy it for the amount that they've offered, unless there are other negotiations that change that. But they're telling you the number they're prepared to give you, no matter what anyone else says the value is. That's why cash matters.
Yeah.
Right. But I will also say, in these markets, there's enough cash buying that cash buyers are being very competitive. They're not underbidding because they're cash. They know they have to come correct, right? And so anybody, even someone who's buying with financing, they have to then think, what are their assumptions the seller's going to make if they're looking at a cash offer? Price is part of it, but if you take some of those risk factors off the table and you're offering other things that are thoughtful, like still being able to do a quick closing. And some lenders, again, the lender is a key partner. If a lender can close on a single family in 2 to 3 weeks, that's just about as good as cash, right? And if you're in conjunction saying, and don't worry about appraisal, because if this property appraises for even 25,000 less or 50,000 less, we can still go forward and close this loan, and you're not going to hear anything from us about that appraised value. If you can convey that, then you're at the table in competition with a cash offer. And then if you've offered other things that we are gleaning, because we're doing a lot of relationship building as the week unfolds and as the offers are coming in for the seller, whether they've set a deadline or not, I'm checking in with the seller's agent every day or every 2 days. How are things going for you? Any new thoughts on your end? Anything important to the seller we should keep in mind, right? And I'm also trying to think about what the seller may not even realize they might need or want. We're going to put that on the table in terms of terms. Let's say, for example, we know that this seller has 2 kids under the age of 3 and a dog. And we know that they're about to close on a purchase, but they haven't closed yet. And we heard that they're planning to do some projects at that new house. We're going to say, listen, we will close you in 2 to 3 weeks, and then we're going to let you stay on in the property for X number of weeks after closing. We're going to make this very easy for you. We're not going to charge you for that time. You do your thing. That's really thoughtful. The whole package is what matters. Whether there's a love letter or not, the package of terms is what makes a seller take pause and realize, actually, you know what, this is going to make so much of a difference for our quality of life during this transition. Wow,
Right.
these people are really thoughtful. That's the stuff that wins. It's the nuanced, textured things, not just the nuts and bolts numbers, because
Right.
they're going to get the number. Who does the seller believe?
Yes, Eileen.
I think that's it. Melanie raises some very, very good points. And that's why you need to have a buyer's agent or the agent that works on your behalf find out what the seller needs. And I know that some people are waiving home inspections, and Melanie and Linda disagree with me, but I think that is so risky. You don't know, unless you have a background in construction and you're a contractor or a home inspector, you don't know what's going on at the property. We have a checklist on Boston.com that you can take with you on housing, home tours, so you can weed out some of the lemons, but it's not meant for you to use it as a, hey, this fuse box looks okay, or the roof doesn't look good, or something like that. You really need to bring somebody who understands that, hey, the shingles on your roof are curling a little bit. That's baconing. That means that roof is going to need to be replaced at some point.
What is the status on inspections, Melanie and Linda? Because people do
One of
want
the
to
things-
do
And I'll go.
One of the things that I would encourage everyone to do, because I do understand the how anxious buyers are and
Yeah.
the need to want to waive inspections. Normally what I say is, I've built houses, I've renovated houses, I've gut rehabbed houses. I have done hundreds and hundreds. I've probably done 1,000 home inspections over the 20 years that I've been doing this business. And one of the things I always say, if I walk out the door, you better walk out with me. And don't fall in love with the paint, the appliances, or how nice the seller's agent is. None of that matters. You need to have eyes and use your senses when you guys are going into these properties. Look at things, touch things, open things up, pay attention to smells and textures, right? Because all of that matters. Is it asbestos? Is it, people will say, oh, you're going to save money, you have a well. Well, does the well have lead in the water? Am I going to be feeding that to my kids or giving that to my plants, and then I'm going to eat the plants, right? So you got to make sure that you're not just being reckless in your desire to want to win on a house. What I would say is, if you're working with a more aggressive agent and they're kind of pushing you and encouraging you to waive your home inspection, then that's fine. Then you ask them to backdoor it for you with a warranty on the house. And those warranties can cover you anywhere from 1 year to 3 years. And it can cover the house top down, even if it has a swimming pool, even if it has a sump pump. You want to build in as much protection for yourself as possible.
What does that mean? I've never heard of that, Linda.
So there are different companies that offer to real estate agents only the opportunity to purchase a home buyer's warranty.
Okay.
You have to buy it you have to flag the property prior to closing, and then you have to submit that to that company that will underwrite the warranty. You give it to your client, and then if anything goes wrong in the house, they pay a $50 or $100 copay, and they come out and they fix it. And it works. I mean, we've had people who've, and think about it, we're in New England, right? And so you can't check certain things at certain times of the year. So you can't check the heating system when if it's 95 degrees outside. Then all of a sudden it gets cold, you go to turn it on and it's broken. Well, that warranty would be triggered, and it would make sure that it fixes in its entirety. And we've had people get brand new systems replaced at $125 because it was covered under the warranty.
Right. Okay. We have about 5 minutes left. I want to take a few questions from the Q&A in the chat. Kara, your screen looks like you're underwater. Oh, I'm so sorry. It's clean, I swear. Oh, this is a really good question. What is the difference between a buyer's and a seller's agent? Are some agents only buyer's agents or some only seller's agents? Do they do both? How do you find a good one? What is the difference?
Different questions. In our markets, often real estate agents play the role of both a buyer and a seller.
Okay.
They can interchange. They can also often, with our team, we work with clients as both buyer and seller. We're helping them sell a property and helping them buy at the same time. But there, you'll sometimes find agents who, for example, say, I'm a buyer's only agent, and that's how they market themselves, is how they position themselves. Either way, we owe our clients fiduciary responsibilities. We have a role of due diligence to play for them. And I would say one way that you can really suss out a good agent is one, asking people you know what they recommend and doing as much research online as you can about what people have said about that agent. And then I would say interview them rigorously. Ask them questions that matter to you, and ask them what you should be asking them. You know, what should I know about you, and what shouldn't? What am I not asking that you want me to know? Those kinds of things are going to give you a lot of sense about what their level of conversation is. What I often start with people telling them is that for me, this is not about property. It's about actually advising you. It's about helping you think and make strategic decisions, frankly, that bring joy. That's what we're focused on. So we're going to have some hard conversations. We're going to think about numbers. We're going to probably shift your priorities even. But that's going to build trust and legitimacy, because I'm actually helping you think about who you are in the market. And I'm not saying, yes, I'm going to just go show you a house. So I think it's that level of conversation. If you can get that, it's going to give you a sense of confidence in who you're looking to hire.
One other question about credit scores. So one of you, I think it was Linda, you mentioned having 2 or 3 letters of pre-approval. Is that right? Does that affect your credit score negatively?
So it's going to affect your credit. It's a hard inquiry. So what you want to do when you get those letters, you want to do the inquiry all within the same period of time. So it's considered one trade line hit. And so
Okay.
people will say, well, why was it checked? Because I was shopping for the best interest rate. Also, when you're looking at lenders, pick different types of lenders, because different lenders have different products. Some lenders will have portfolio capabilities. Some lenders will not. You need to ask those questions before you let them pull your credit. You need to say, hey, do you offer portfolio products? Do you offer federal products? If so, what are they? And then you need to make sure if they're income-based guidelines, do you fit those income guidelines? Because what you don't want to do is apply only to have them turn around and deny you. And you say,
Right.
well, why am I denying? They say, oh, because of all of our products are capped at $129,000 a year. You're over income. So these are the questions you have to have with the lender early on. The other thing you want to know is reserves. For those of you who are seeking to purchase a house that is a multifamily, make sure you understand the reserve requirement of that particular lender. Reserves are specific to the lender, so just make sure you understand it. The other thing, for those buyers who have student loans, gotta ask the question up front. How are they underwriting? Are they Fannie Mae? Are they Freddie Mac? Who are they underwriting with? It matters. And the reason for that is because how the student loan debt is going to be calculated. The good news is in June of this year, they changed the requirements. So now the way you calculate how the debt is going to be applied to you, take the loan balance times 0.5%. That is the amount that's going to be attributed to you. It opened up the doors for recent graduates or anyone who is carrying a lot of student loan debt. It makes it so that you can now buy. But again, how they underwrite it, what formula and calculation they're using, you need to know all of that before you give someone your social security number to check your credit.
And
Oh, go ahead.
I would also say, to all that Linda just conveyed, it actually can be a really good starting point to have your realtor, your real estate agent, help you think through some of those mechanics and figure out what kind of lenders you should even go to. It can make
That was
this a
going to be my
much
next
smoother
question.
process, because
Yeah.
people actually, they're doing a lot of searching online and they're following ads. And so, so it might not be easy to be able to distinguish between a mortgage broker and a portfolio lender, for example. So it's helpful to have someone who actually understands how to delineate, talk to you about, actually want to challenge you to have a conversation with this professional and that, and we're going to compare.
Right. That was going to be my question. How do you know, if you've never done this before, who's a good lender? How do you work your way through that?
Yes, get a really good real estate agent who's a buyer's agent, whose duty of care and loyalty is to you, and who will protect you and who will help coach you through some of these tough decisions, particularly about when it's appropriate to pay over the asking price, when it's appropriate to pay more than the appraised value. And so, if you have think about it, if we're on Beacon Hill and it's a gut rehab condo and we're paying over asking price, instinctively, that if you actually gut rehab it, you're going to be able to absorb the loss, right? But if the house is fully renovated, there's nothing more you can do to it. You got to be really careful now paying above asking price, because what will you do to build and increase the equity, just short of buying the unit next door and breaking the wall and combining the two units, right? So you got to really think. I mean, you can't really start your life, especially with a purchase as big as your first house, with a negative.
On that note, I'm getting chats asking for contact info for each of you, Melanie and Linda. So maybe before we turn it back over to Giselle, you can each tell me how to get in touch, and then we'll turn it back over. So Linda?
So if you want to reach me for more information, I'm happy to take any questions or emails, and I'll try to answer them as best I can. You can email me at championhomebuying@gmail.com, or you can call me at 617-877-0363.
And Melanie?
And yeah, I've got a crew. We love to work with first-time buyers and clients of all stripes, but I have 2 other team members on my team who work specifically with buyers as well. And you can find us very easily at goodbostonliving.com, goodbostonliving.com, and message us from there.
Awesome. And Eileen, you don't need to share your contact info unless you want story ideas.
Sure. Send story ideas to address@globe.com.
Awesome. I'm going to turn it back over to Giselle now.
Thank you, Kara. And on behalf of UBS, I want to thank all of our speakers today, Linda Champion, Melanie Swayze, Eileen Woods. You've given us all such great insights, and hopefully everyone listening feels a little more confident as they navigate this environment. I know that I do. To everyone who tuned in, thank you for joining and spending your valuable time with us. If you have any more questions about your specific situation, whether it's related to buying a home, any other life milestone, or your overall financial goals, I encourage you to speak to your UBS financial advisor or to reach out to a UBS advisor in your area. You can also check out some more resources at ubs.com/rising. Finally, thank you, Kara, for moderating the session, even with the colds.
Oh my gosh, thank you.
Incredible job, incredible job. And thank you to the Boston Globe as well for putting on this program. So enjoy the rest of your week and stay well.
Thank you.
Thank you all.